Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to break down the best of the rest. Those are the players that just narrowly missed our top 50, which was released last week. And we're going to get into all of that on tonight's episode, which is brought to you by IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Protein Bars, IQ Mixed Hydration Mixes, and IQ Joe Mushroom Coffees are the delicious, low-sugar, brain and body fuel you need to win your day. The Ultimate Sampler Pack is a great way to try all IQ Bar products in flavors. You get 9 IQ Bars, 8 IQ Mix Sticks, and 4 IQ Joe Sticks. All IQ Bar products are clean label certified and entirely free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial ingredients. Also, all IQ Bar products are packed with clean, delicious ingredients to keep you physically and mentally fit, like magnesium, lion's mane, and more. I've been trying out some of the IQ Bars. I'm personally a fan of the peanut butter chip flavor, but there's a lot of great flavors out there. And if you want to try them out, right now is the time to do so, because right now IQ Bar is offering our special podcast listeners 20% off all IQ Bar products, including the Ultimate Sampler Pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64,000. Text MLB to 64,000. That's MLB to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. And if you're watching us here on YouTube, you can get that info in the lower third graphic. Now, I want to bring up something here, which Nick pointed out on our X a few days ago. We just had our 6th anniversary. It's hard to believe it has flown by the years we've been doing this show. So, before we get into this episode, any reflections do you guys have?
Nick, you're muted, so I guess I'll give my reflections. It's been a wild ride. Obviously, like Nick said on Twitter, I still refuse to call it X. We have our first show. We're excited. Boom, COVID hits. Minor league season canceled. Baseball has a 60-game schedule. You couldn't have started off in a, at least on paper, in a worse way. But we made it work. And look, it's because of the audience, because of the viewers, the listeners, the patrons that we're still able to do this and continue to improve and expand, and couldn't be more grateful. Hopefully we go for at least 6 more years, because I could do this the rest of my life personally.
Yeah, 6 years. I now learned how to unmute myself. I was saying I forgot. I had scheduled that tweet back in like January, I think, when I was thinking about it. I'm like, I don't want to forget this year. So I scheduled that way in advance. And then I was like, when it popped up. But yeah, it's pretty wild, especially like the three of us didn't know each other. And it was pretty much just I feel like a couple of days of texting back and forth. And then it was like, let's do a podcast episode, and here's our top 30 prospect list. And yeah, like you said, to have no minor league season, but I felt like that allowed us to get our reps in, build the core audience, a lot of whom have been with us for these 6 years from the very beginning, which is pretty awesome to see. And the growth has been unbelievable, to be honest. So yeah, through all the good, the bad, it never fails when, to get messages from like players or like coaches reaching out, or like people, even listeners of the show that reach out and be like, man, the amount of information I listened 3 times this week. Like legitimately, it's like, that's awesome that people are actually listening to what we have to say. I'm just a dude with a microphone who watches. If my wife knew how much Orioles minor league baseball I've watched over the last 6 years, she'd have me committed, to be honest. So I try to hide that from her. But yeah, it's pretty unbelievable that here we are, 2026, still going.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been awkward. It could have been like we get in the same room in a lot of uncomfortable silence, but it just worked. It was like it was meant to be, and here we are, 6 years later, still making the same mistakes every now and then with the mutings or the, technical difficulties whenever we have a guest on behind the scenes. But yeah, we're still doing it, and yeah, just couldn't be more grateful to be able to.
Couldn't agree more, and we've got a big year here. We've got a live show coming up at the end of March with Connor Newcomb at Checker Spot Brewing, which I'll give more details about before we wrap up. And we're also going to have our 500th episode at some point during this season. And now that we'll be back to 2 episodes a week starting this week, we'll get there a lot faster. And we're back to 2 episodes this week, joined by Jake Riddle earlier this week of MLB.com. He gave us a lot of good insights. But now we're going to shift our focus back to prospects and back to our top 50 list, which was unveiled last week. As is the case every year, there are a handful of players that get votes from the 3 of us on our individual list, but don't make the overall top 50. In a lot of cases, it's just that player was not ranked high enough on the other lists to make it. I think we've only ever had one occasion where a player was maybe 49th or 50th on all of our lists and got booted out because of the point system. But for the most part, these are guys that made 1 or 2 lists, but just ultimately didn't make the cut. It's 7 players total. It was 8 at the beginning, but after Wellington Arcina was traded to the Diamondbacks as part of the Blaze Alexander deal, Lisandro Sanchez jumped onto our top 50, which means now there's 7 players who didn't wind up in the final list that got individual votes from us. And I'm going to start with the guy that might qualify as the most notable, and that's Griff O'Farrell. He was the 32nd overall pick in the 2024 draft and was ranked as our 14th prospect going into the 2025 season. We know how things played out from there. A really bad first half at the plate at Aberdeen, but then he got going about mid-July. On-base streak that stretched into August, wound up earning a promotion to Chesapeake where he put up decent numbers over a 10-game sample size. Still, the final batting line of 228, 322, 304 with a 92 WRC plus over the course of a full season was not quite the performance we were looking for from O'Farrell. In the end, O'Farrell was named on Bob and Nick's list. 47th on Bob's and 48th on Nick's. However, he fell off of my top 50, which is probably what kept him off the overall list. And Bob, I'll start with you here. It was kind of a roller coaster with O'Farrell last year because he was so bad for the better part of 3.5 months that it was very easy to write him off. And then we started to see some signs of life at the plate later in the year. So how do you assess him right now?
It is tough. There's no doubt about it. And it's interesting because he was ranked number 14 a year ago on our list, preseason 2025, and just completely fell off. I don't know. It's like I was never a big fan of the draft pick from the beginning. I feel like I was the lowest person on it, and I'm not saying that to take a victory lap or anything. It's just that even when he was like more highly regarded coming into last season, to me it was almost like a low ceiling, high floor type of player. And I still look at him that way, especially once he started to get back to his old approach of just not trying to lift the ball, pull the ball. He's just going to make his contact and take his singles and play his really solid defense. And it was actually after I got a good in-person look at him when I was the guest commentator at the Ironbirds, rest in peace, last year. And I really saw how good his defense was. I think he played second base that game, actually. It was either shortstop or second base. But he made some really good plays. He's got a high baseball IQ, I would say. IQ bar, even. And, yeah, I think getting him out of Aberdeen, I think it's going to help, at least mentally, for a lot of these guys. And maybe he's one of them. Starting Double-A Chesapeake. And if he gets off to a good start, I think he can still be that same high floor, low ceiling type of guy where a year or two from now, he might be in competition for that last bench role like we talked about with Jake Rill, with some of these guys like Luis Vasquez and Jeremiah Jackson earlier this week. But, yeah, I had him 47th. I think Nick had him 48th. And he probably just missed your list, I'm assuming, Zach. But, yeah, I think he could easily get back on this list somewhere. I don't think he's ever going to get back up to a 14th overall on our list, even if he goes crazy. But I'm not like, it's not a Vance Honeycutt situation for me, which to me, I was just like, I'm done until he can show me. And now he's hit 3 for 3 with 3 home runs this spring training. Am I back on? We'll have to see what happens in the actual regular season, the daily grind. But Griff O'Farrell, it was never this huge, like, oh my God, I'm done with him. It was just like, okay, he's going to need to hit at least a little bit.
Yeah, I kept him on the back end because at that point, I don't know. It's always the battle for me. Like, do you go the super high ceiling, complete wild card, or do you go with the higher floor pick? I think that's something that I feel like I talk about every year. It's something that I battle with, but I kept O'Farrell on there because of the floor. Right? He does have strong defense. Is he a strong shortstop? Probably not. He's probably second baseman, but he did swipe 44 bases as well last year, which is a positive. Again, he's not fast. Like, nothing he does is like outstanding. Like, there's no elite tool, but we've talked about that IQ a lot. He knows how to steal a base. He's not the fastest guy, but as far as like if you could separate just pure speed grade from a base running grade, he's very, very good base running grade. He was 44 for 52 in stolen base attempts last year, and he did a lot of that at UVA when he was there as well. It's just, there's also the swinging strike rate was like sub 6%. I mean, it's one of the lowest swinging strike rates, at least in the Orioles organization. I don't know what it was comparatively speaking, like across the board, but among Orioles prospects, it's like EBJ and Griff O'Farrell are two of the best in terms of making contact on balls in the strike zone. For me, it's just two things that really stick out. It's one, the John Mioli's note in his top 10 update or whatever his Baseball America list, the sub 20% hard hit rate last year. Like that's brutal. And for someone like Enrique Bradfield Jr., if that's what he's at, he's got the speed and defense to make up for that. Griff O'Farrell does not. So yeah, I don't know. He's probably going to start back in AA, I'm assuming, since he reached there at the end of last season. And, if he runs into some early home runs, it might get some people thinking, Griff O'Farrell, here we go. But like he did that at UVA as well. It's like once he stopped facing, I don't know, North Jacksonville, Florida Tech School of the Mines in February and March, schools like that, the power just was non-existent at UVA. And I think that's what we've seen in the pros. It's going to be very minimal impact on the baseball. And, when John comes on the show and, you talk about why put him on the back of your top 10? Because last year, I think he was number 10 on John's top 10 list at Baseball America. But I think we've talked about him multiple times with John. And even when he like kind of shrugs at a high floor guy, I think that speaks volumes to me. Like someone who's talking with scouts and everyone within the organization about these guys and his preparation, I think a lot of that matches kind of my thoughts when knowing from what I know from him and having watched him in college and then seeing what he did last year. It's just like, it's tough for me to see much, like really any ceiling here with O'Farrell, but I kept him on the back end of my list just because that floor. I do think he can be a guy that sticks around for as long as you keep him in the organization, like quality, depth. And if he is a guy that you need to bring up to the big leagues, he's going to play a solid defense for you. And you hope that he's at least like a pesky at bat and works deep counts and maybe can, plop one over second base or shortstop and get one into the outfield and then use his smarts on the base path. But yeah, we'll see what he does in 2026 if he can impact the ball a little bit more. But I feel like he's not a guy that has a lot of projection left in the frame.
Poor man's Taron Vavra, right-handed, with better defense, maybe? I don't know.
That might not be far off. O'Farrell was close to making my list. He was in the mix for those last couple of spots, but where he missed for me, there was first of all, a younger infielder that I wanted to find room for that we're going to talk about in a minute. But when I kept going back through the good parts of O'Farrell's season, I was looking for that one thing that made me think, okay, this was it. And there just wasn't really that, like, one thing that I saw that made me think, okay, there were sustained improvements. It just sort of felt like he's always been a good contact hitter. The hits were falling in. He's always had impeccable strike zone judgment. He's racking up a lot of walks. He did have a 40% line drive rate when he went to Chesapeake. Now, if he can sustain that, that's going to do a lot for him next year. As you guys said, he's not going to hit for a lot of power, but if he can drive the ball a little bit more and at least have more line drive singles or balls that slice the gap, and he uses that really high baseball IQ to know when he can run out an extra base, that's going to do a lot because he is such a high floor guy. And generally speaking, players like him get a long leash in pro ball because they can handle both sides of the second base bag well, and they don't give away at bats. But the bat right now for me just has a lot of question marks in it. When I look at him, I think, okay, there's a fine line between someone like Blaze Alexander, who's in camp with the Orioles now and is probably going to be on the roster for at least a good portion, if not all of this year. And someone like Mason McCoy, who is a really good upper minor leagues player, a really good guy to have in your organization, but not someone you want on your major league bench for a prolonged period. It's a matter of figuring out where O'Farrell falls on that line that, to me, is going to determine his career at this point.
Mason McCoy's pretty spot on comp, I feel like. And that's not an insult.
No, he's been hanging around. He's got some major league run with the Padres. And you get shipped off to the Pacific Coast League and you jack 25 home runs and look like a stud out there.
Speaking of the infielder I just mentioned a moment ago, I'm going to go right to him now, and that's Jose Pena, who got votes on Bob's list and my list. Bob had him at 46. I had him at 49th. And I know for myself that what this came down to was that Pena was highly regarded in the 2025 international free agent class, which was a comparatively slow one when you look at it in context of 2026 class, but still a fairly deep one. This was kind of the guy that was seen as the prize of that class, but as some national writers, including Eric Longenhagen and Fangraphs, noted at the time, this was probably going to be a player that required 2 years in the DSL because he was going to be going into pro ball at 16, and his first month was great. He batted 300 in June, but then things really cooled off for him offensively after that. Final line, when you look at it at first glance, isn't great. 240, 356, 341 with a 91 WRC plus. But one thing that jumped out at me is that he didn't turn 17 until the very end of the season. And he had one plate appearance last year against pitchers younger than him. Think about that in the DSL where, pitchers do tend to be a little bit older than hitters, but still, if you're in the DSL all year and you only face one pitcher that's younger than you, that says a lot about your age. So I feel like there's enough skills there for Pena to be the kind of guy that in his second go-around can make a really good impression. Ideally, his season looks something a little bit like Jamel Newell's 2025, where we see the big improvement at the plate. We see the walk numbers spike up. He moves around the infield, looks good there. So hopefully that's what we see from Pena. And I admit that statistically, if you're just going to look at the stat line from last year, Pena doesn't have the strongest case on this list. But I think when you consider the full context, his age, the profile, the fact that there is some optimism for now that he can stick at shortstop or at least play shortstop at the high level, that gives me a little bit of hope.
I was actually very impressed with Pena, just considering the age thing. Again, this is like a high school sophomore or junior aged kid who's, going through the grind of a professional season, shortened season, but still a few months of a daily grind out there. And got off to a hot start. Kept going out there. He had a walk rate almost 15%, strikeout rate just over 20%. Say slightly under league average WRC plus. He popped a couple home runs, 11 doubles, stole 14 bases out of 20 attempts. Yeah, like you said, if he can come back, and I do agree that he should repeat the DSL and have a Jamon Noel type of season and show that growth from season to season, then I'm going to be really encouraged. I think you see the potential there. And also, he's another case of why Steven Martinez is just so freaking impressive where he is at his age.
Yeah, I'd pull up my list real quick. And so I did not have Jose Pena. But when I look at the back end of my list, it was, Peyton Eales at 47, Griffo Farrell at 48. So those are two high floor guys. And then I rounded it out with Ellis Cuevas and Jamon Newell. And I think that just kind of gets to what I was talking about. Do I go with the higher floor guys? I could have easily left Griffo Farrell off my list and put a Jose Pena on there. And for me, it was just like like you said, he played all year as a 16-year-old. And so I need another year to see. But yeah, like you guys mentioned, the numbers were pretty solid when you consider the age. Even, it's like he's listed at 6'2" with above average tools across the board. Maybe he can be a plus defender or have plus speed. But what's he going to look like in 2 years? If he's got that 6'2" frame, it's like, then what do the tools look like? So for me, that's why it's kind of like a wait and see approach. Does he develop more power? Do they lean into the speed and make him more of a slasher? Like what kind of player is he? And so like those are just the questions that we don't know yet. But yeah, to hold his own like he did, he was almost a league average bat. Yeah, if you look at the numbers down there in the DSL as a 16-year-old, which is super impressive. For me, I'm going to be paying attention to if he does start back in the DSL, I think that makes a ton of sense. And that's not a, oh well, so much for that. It's just a, let's wait and see then. You compare year 1 to year 2 and see if we see improvements. It's just a longer game there. But if he's in the FCL to start 2026, and the conversation is he going to reach Delmarva by the age of 17? Then the whole conversation on Jose Pena changes, and that's when you see him rise into like a potentially, if he has that type of growth, you're talking about like a fringe top 30 prospect, I feel like, on our list by the end of the year. So yeah, that's first step for me, is seeing where they place him. But either way, the kid, he was a literal child last year, so it's just hard to have any like hard takeaways yet.
That is a really great point, because a lot of development around this early young age, so he could take a huge leap that we're not seeing over the offseason. The Orioles would know that, and if they do push him, then that is a great sign. But it doesn't mean it's a bad sign that he repeats DSL either. So
nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet, and the not-so-secret secret, with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
Now, I will promise our listeners it's not a discussion entirely about infielders. We do have some other kinds of players that we're going to get to, but I do want to stick with the infielders here and go to a guy that was on Nick's list, and that's Elvin Garcia. Now, Garcia, a year ago, was our 30th ranked prospect, pre-2025, and that was after a breakout debut season in the DSL. But last year, the numbers really tapered off as he went to the FCL. But as Nick pointed out over at our Substack, he did deal with an injury. It appears to be a hand injury that might have stalled his progress at the plate and explained some of the issues that he had, including a big uptick in strikeouts. So, Nick, this is a player that we've talked about off and on over the last 2 years. As I touched on, he made a really positive first impression in 2024, but then stepped back last year. How do you see him rebounding in this season?
Yeah, I kind of touched on this a little bit on the last week's episode, because talking about growing pains, I still don't know how to listen to questions sometimes. But just kind of repeating what I said then, yeah, it was year 1 he was a DSL All-Star, and you had guys like Ben Badler writing about like, oh, Elvin Garcia is probably going to be the best shortstop out of the Dominican Republic the Orioles have ever signed. And yeah, that's a low bar up to this point, but still, like, super high praise from Garcia. And then you see him ranked 5th on Eric Longenhagen's list. I believe he was 5th last year on his Orioles top prospect list. And you're like, that is a wild ranking. But I think it was because, he's breaking down data on synergy. He's breaking down every single thing that he has access to there. But apparently he also, like, saw him live on the backfields last year and was like, this dude is bigger, pushing 200 pounds and stronger and hitting tanks, and was throwing out Samuel Basayo in the same sentence as Elvin Garcia, which, that's a lot for a kid his age. But the Orioles also gave him a $500,000 signing bonus in 2024. So I didn't know about the hand injury. I just saw like the awful numbers in the DSL last year, or whatever level he was at last year. And it was Mioli who made the note, I think, in his Baseball America chat, because shout out to people who like peppered him with Elvin Garcia questions in that chat. And that's where John noted, there was a hand injury. So if that really impacted his season and he can be somewhat even at least the type of player that Eric Longenhagen says he saw on the backfields last year, like that could be fun. I'm excited too, because that's just going to add another layer to this organization. If Elvin Garcia and Jose Pena, like if they can take a big step in 2026, I mean, you're adding 2 more $500,000 to $1 million shortstops that are impressing in the system on top of Wilfred De La Cruz and Jose Luis Acevedo. Hopefully gets off to a hot start, and the ammunition you have of 17, 18-year-old shortstop prospects with high prospect pedigree could be a lot of fun. Looking at, I'm projecting ahead to like the trade deadline. That's where my headline goes. If there was going to be buyers at this point, to have more guys like Elvin Garcia starting to hit again in 2026, you're adding to that war chest there.
No, yeah, it's a great point. I'm still high on Elvin Garcia, and especially because of the injury potentially interrupting basically the entire season for him. The reason he just didn't stick on my list, it's just like the same thing we were already talking about with the Jose Pena type. It's like there's so much unknown still, and since he did have that injury, since he did have a poor season, I'm going to give the shine to Alessandro Sanchez, who put up the numbers and was able to at least, get off to a good start to his career. That's the problem with these international guys like Anderson De Los Santos. He was the third baseman and seemed like he had a higher upside. Now he's a not strictly first baseman, but mostly first baseman. Still putting up some decent numbers, but it's taken a while to get him here. The upside's not as high, so it kind of falls back down. I'm leaving room in my heart for Elvin Garcia to jump up into that top 30 range all over again. I think I could easily see it happen, especially if he's healthy and Eric Longenhagen, the same leaps that he was making last year, if he can carry that over, then I could see him right back on this list. But for the time being, I left him off.
Yeah, I left him off too, and he was one of those guys that was in the mix for the last couple of spots. I just wanted to see, I want to make sure that the injury was the cause of the problems last year, because the jump in the strikeout rate really did concern me. You expect that to go up level to level, but to see it jump as much as it did from the DSL to the FCL was concerning to me. But I agree with everything Nick said. I think that there is a lot of ceiling there, and if he can be healthy this year, we could see more of it. And I'm going to go to another guy that Nick had on his list that all three of us were pretty high on going into 2025, but then his season, it just felt like never really got underway. He was held back by a hamstring injury, and that's Ellis Cuevas. Hamstring injury kept him out of the first few weeks of the season at Delmarva. He finally gets to Delmarva in May and is essentially a league average bat for a few months before he's promoted to Aberdeen, where he really did struggle down the stretch at the plate. Now, there's a lot of things to like about Cuevas, and we saw some of it last year. He runs very well. He gives you some versatility in the field, and he can occasionally run into one. He's got surprising power for a guy his size, but Nick, as you pointed out on Substack recently, there is a little bit of pressure on Cuevas right now because the versatility is really what can keep him in the lineup most days if he does go to Frederick. I will say that he was close to making my personal list. He fell off of that. He was not on Bob's list either, but Nick, you had him at 49th on your list.
Yeah, just hanging on by a thread, because he was my breakout pick for 2025, but then that hamstring injury seemed to really mess with him, and I'm holding out hope another year, because he's still, 21 years old, so he's still a younger guy. You talk about the power. I think he had the longest home run in the 2024 season, a monster shot. He stole 82 bases over his last 158 games. He's got the speed. It's just the numbers weren't good in Aberdeen when he got promoted, but he still walked at a 13% rate and stole a bunch of bases. So he's positives there. I'm going to assume the injury, just he was never able to get right, and then you factor in playing at Aberdeen. Maybe that compounded everything. So holding out hope for maybe 2025, he can have a little bit of a breakout. But yeah, my big question is, he's probably still listed as a shortstop. If you look at a roster or his player page, he's played 0 games at shortstop his entire career. So I don't know why they still have him listed at shortstop, but he is not a shortstop. And he's been playing a lot of first base. I know there was talk, I was told by someone in the organization a couple of years ago that they were going to move him to center field, and they were really excited to see him get some run out there. And I think with the addition of some of the guys that have come in since then, he's kind of been pushed out of that role. So it's been a lot of first base and some corner outfield. And it's just like, that's what scares me. It's like, that's going to put a lot more pressure on the bat if he's a first baseman. Like, I think he's listed at like 5'10 or 5'11. So maybe he's 6 feet. Maybe. I doubt it. I think 5'11 is very generous listing for Ellis Cuevas. I haven't seen him in person, though. But yeah, it's just, what scares me is the playing first base for the most part, and he's not going to be a guy who pops 20-plus home runs a year.
Yeah, he's not far off my top 50 list. He's right in that next group of players, and it really was, again, just like a lot of these guys, Thomas Sosa too, just injuries kind of hampered their season. You don't know how much it affected the development, but he's still only 21 years old. And yeah, just first base, corner outfield, it looks like is what his future position is and current position. And yeah, that just is going to put more pressure on the bat. You saw the ISO went down a lot in 2025 compared to 2024. That's going to need to go back up. But if he can hit, go to Frederick and just go bonkers and hit 15 home runs or something this year, then maybe he could make it right back on my list, because he's only 21 years old. That's the thing with these international guys. You get, they might be Rule 5 eligible a lot faster, but they also get more chances to develop. Michael Hernandez is still in this organization somehow.
Yeah, Cuevas was close to my list too, and he ultimately just fell off of it. And for me, I believe that his best path to the majors is as a super utility player, just with his speed, the power he can give you, and if he's able to sustain the walk rates to some extent, that's going to help. But Nick's absolutely right. If he's going to end up as a corner outfielder, first base type, that is going to put a lot more pressure on the bat. And I'm going to go now to a guy that I had on my list at the final spot at number 50, but he fell off of Bob and Nick's list, and that is right-handed pitcher Tanner Smith, a relief prospect that was acquired from the Padres as part of the Ryan O'Hearn, Ramon Laureano trade. At the deadline, the Padres originally drafted Smith out of Harvard, and full disclosure, Smith walked a lot of batters during his time at Harvard. And we saw that problem carry over into the first half of last season, but then after the trade, granted, I don't know that Smith had the time to make any adjustments after the trade. My guess is that he didn't, but after a cameo at Delmarva, the Orioles promoted him to Aberdeen, where the command was really sharp. 11 strikeouts to no walks over 5 1/3 innings pitched. And then he went out to the Arizona Fall League, and we got a good glimpse of his arsenal there. He has a 95-mile-per-hour sinker, which he can pair with a slider that's a good pitch. Also mixes in a four-seamer, cutter, and curveball. This is a guy that I do believe is a pure relief prospect. I don't think he's going to have the command to be a starter, but with that broad of a pitch mix, that gives him a good base to work from. And the other thing, too, where I want to give him the benefit of the doubt is that where the walks occurred at a high rate last year was in Lake Elsmer, which is part of the notoriously hitter-friendly California League. So I want to see if a full season out of that kind of environment, combined with the improvements that he made towards the end of last year, lead to better command from Smith. Because I really believe that that's going to be the difference between him being a big league reliever and being somebody who tops out in the high minors, because he's 23, probably going to start this year at Double-A. And in a coin toss for me between him and Cameron Foster, the broader pitch mix and the age is the reason I went with Smith. And I'll admit that this may turn out to be that he regresses with the command and he struggles over the course of this season, but I like the way he ended last year, and I think there's a lot to work with here.
Yeah, Smith is... There are like 5 guys that I really, really wanted to put on my top 50. When I mentioned last week, when we did our full top 50 list, like, there are guys outside of the top 50 that we're not even going to talk about tonight. There's one in particular that I highly regret not putting on my top 50. Like that, and it's true. It's real talent, like real talent. That I think if you're following the Orioles minor league system, like these are guys you truly do need to be paying attention to. Smith was one of those guys that I felt like should have been on my top 50 because I'll admit at the time of the trade with San Diego, I didn't think too much of him. Honestly, I saw a 6'6" righty from an Ivy League school. I'm like, all right, Elias is like, hey, throw the Ivy Leaguer into that deal for me. Just looking out for my Ivy League friend there. I don't know if. Was he Yale? Where did Elias go?
Yale, yeah.
All right, I don't know the sports rivalries between Ivy League schools or if that's even a thing among Ivy League schools as far as sports rivalries are concerned, but that was my thought. And then you look at the numbers, and like I said, he's 22, 23 years old, in low A. It's fine numbers. You take into the fact where he was pitching, okay, but still nothing special. And when he got to high A and you routed off those numbers, like no walks to 11 strikeouts in just 5 innings, I'm like, okay, this is at least interesting. I'll circle the name. That's someone that when 2026 starts, I'm going to watch. And then when he goes out to the Arizona Fall League, and when you're 6'6" with 7 feet of extension, throwing 95, setting 95, and you're getting a, 73% whiff rate with your slider, like, that's, all right, you got something there. Like, I agree. I don't think... Maybe if there's a lot of injuries in the minor league injury dump that we're going to get, hopefully soon we find out this stuff. I'm chomping at the bit at this point to find out who's going to begin the year hurt or not. But maybe if there's a bunch of injuries, he could be a guy they think about transitioning and stretching out a little bit. But yeah, I don't. No, you're 6'6", you're already 23 years old. Put him in high A for a little bit, maybe even start him in double A bullpen and let that 95, 96 mile an hour sinker ride and see what it can do.
Yeah, I'm very, very big fan of Tanner Smith following the trade. He's the one that, from the time reading the names, looking into them, to the time, the offseason officially began, his stock rose probably the most for me. I think he's in that next group of like Tyson Neighbors, not as good or as potential closer as Tyson Neighbors, but in that next group of exciting relief prospects that we kind of have with the Micah Ashmans, and he's in that group for me. And yeah, I could easily see him ending this year at AAA Norfolk's bullpen and being a guy that we're excited about coming into 2027.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet, and the not-so-secret secret. With Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
I'm going to go over to another pitcher now, and this is a guy that Bob and I both had on our list, but that fell off of Nick's, and that's Iber Cartaya. Cartaya was a guy that I know I considered a breakout candidate coming into 2025, and it did not get off to a great start for him, and depending on how you want to look at the final numbers from last season, you could say that he made progress. He was able to get through a full season. He limited batters to an opposing average of 174, struck out 117 batters in 98 innings, but then also walked a lot of guys. And the walks were the biggest concern with Cartaya coming into this year. I believed that a lot of that could be resolved by cleaning up his delivery, and although the delivery did look better to me this year, we were still seeing the command issues. One thing that I realized, though, when I really started to dig into Cartaya in preparation for the list, and the reason that I put him on is this number, which is his walk totals over the course of the season. The first 3 months, in particular, were bad. He had 43 walks between April, May, and June. Finished the year with 65 total. He had a high walk rate at Aberdeen, but that was largely inflated by his final start of the season, where he issued 6 walks and 4 innings pitched. Other than that, there were some small signs that the command was coming along, but I'd also acknowledge here that he was not that deep into my top 50, and there are still some command concerns there. So, Bob, I'm curious to get your thoughts. We were similar rankings on him. I had him 46. You had him at 50th.
Yeah, I'm still intrigued, and it was such a weird year because he got off to such a terrible start, especially on the command control front, and then he was really dominant for a while and then kind of faded away. Starting to get like Edgar Portes vibes, which he obviously went through some injury issues and then kind of hit a wall at Double-A. We haven't seen him in a while, but I think it's a very, very important year for Cartaya. Maybe he's a guy that could transition to the bullpen and have more success that way, but he's just got to get the command under control, or the control under command. He's got decent stuff. He's good size, but the potential's there. He's hanging on my list, though. He's hanging on by a thread. Maybe if I was rethinking things, I would put Tanner Smith over him and have him creep on this list, but that last, like we said, how deep the system is, I feel like 35 to 75 is like almost interchangeable.
For me, it was just, I thought he was a great follow going into last year when he's still striking out like 30% of guys. He slashed the walk rate down to like 10%. He has like a ERA of like 1 when he got to Delmarva. Even the FIP and XFIP were like 2 something, I think. But he's 6'5", he's lanky, there's lots of moving parts. You mentioned the delivery there, still very raw. But you saw the potential. You can, when you're watching these guys in Delmarva, like we talk about this all the time, how you can tell the guys who are pitching and the guys who are just throwing. And Cartaya felt like was pitching with an attack plan. And I even got some good feedback from one of the DSL pitching coaches that he had worked with years before. And so I was like super intrigued. But now, like, he's 23. The strikeout rate dropped a lot last year. The walk rate spiked back up. And for me, like, yeah, he has some of those outlier outings, but the swinging strike rate also dropped a lot. And opponents only hit 172 against him between low A and high A. But he also was running like a 240 BABIP, so maybe a little bit lucky. I think that the FIP and XFIP were much, much higher this year. So maybe just some signs that scared me off a little bit. But I think he still has 2 years. Like I know he's Rule 5 eligible, but I don't think that means anything. Like unless he explodes this year, which I don't see happening, there could be real progression. But like I'm talking about like he ends the year in AAA type explosion. You can keep him in Frederick to start the year, have him in the year in AA, 0% chance he gets picked in the Rule 5 draft. Protect him in the minor league phase. He gets another shot in 2027. So. I mean, this is a guy he's a young guy, still a little bit raw. So I think if him still having 2 more years, I'm still going to be paying attention and watching for growth in 2026. It was just, there were just those 5 or 6 other guys that I really wanted to put on my list that I couldn't. And if I couldn't fit them on, I found it difficult on my personal list to fit Cartaya on there, but still watching him.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And we'll go to the last player we're going to highlight, and it's a guy that, to me, is really intriguing, although he did not make my personal top 50, and that's outfielder Cam Lee, a 9th-round pick in the 2025 draft out of Mineral Area College in Park Hills, Missouri. So a JUCO pick here. Lee turned 20 in October. We have not seen him in an official game yet, but some national writers, including Joe Doyle, had positive reports about him coming into the draft last year and felt like the Orioles got a good value getting him in the 9th round. And Bob apparently intrigued enough by Lee to put him at 49th on his list. He was in consideration for me, but he did not make my personal top 50, nor did he make Nick's. So, Bob, I'll let you start off this discussion. What do you like about Cam Lee?
It's a lot of unknown, but I basically like that Joe Doyle loves it. Here's a tweet from last year's draft. The Orioles are absolutely crushing the sub D1 ranks in the class. So many interesting prospects without name recognition. Folks will learn soon, I'm sure. Cam Lee out of Mineral Area College was really buzzy late. He was 19 at the time of the draft out of the junior college or community college, and 5'11", only listed at 165, so you can see the physical projection there. I just think, and another guy that I think could break out, and Jaden Lowe was another like unknown guy that seemingly out of high school. I didn't know much about him, but the Orioles have brought him to spring training on road trips like multiple times this spring, which is really interesting considering he never even played professionally yet, and seems really quick to do that unless they're confident in his poise and ability to hang at his young age. So between Cam Lee and Jaden Lowe, I think at least one of these guys is going to pop off and be, maybe not breaking the top 100 status a year from now the way that Nate George did, but I think at least one of these guys is going to break out in a similar way.
Yeah, I put those two guys in the same group as well, just because of, like you said, all the unknowns. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them is a top 30 prospect by the end of the year, to be honest. Like, Lowe had good reports coming out of the draft about his hit tool. I think maybe the non-MLB broadcast, what little you could find about Jaden Lowe, there were some strong reports about the hit tool. But I think the MLB broadcast, one of the guys, he was one that was like, we got nothing. And they're waiting for a text from a scout buddy. And I guess some scout, I don't know who, texted, I think it was Mayo, and was like, yeah, he should have gone to BYU, don't like the hit tool, blah, blah, blah. Just trashing him on draft night. It was like a little uncalled for. But he was actually committed to Arizona State first, I learned. I found an interview that he did this morning. He was actually committed to Arizona State first, then ended up committing to BYU before the draft. And he said himself that he knows that he doesn't have like that elite tool, but he's going to find a way to beat you. He just described himself as, the typical, I'm just the ultimate dirtbag type player. And also described himself as someone who, if you're playing against him, you're going to hate him. But if I'm on your team, you're going to love me. I'm like, I get that vibe. I like that vibe. I get what he's talking about. So I'm excited to see what he can do on the field. And with Lee, if I had batted ball data on him, that would probably propel him. And it was good. That would probably propel him into my top 50, well into my top 50. Because, yeah, he had 13 home runs, but it's at the JUCO level. So, like, raw home run numbers, like, really can't tell you but so much. But, I mean, he said himself on a podcast this offseason, apparently he had SEC interest before the Orioles drafted him. So if that's true, I mean, there's a lot of intrigue here with both these guys, Lee and Lowe.
Yeah, and just going back to Lowe for a minute, if I let signing bonuses sway my opinion a lot, Lowe probably would have been on my list because the Orioles did go 110,000 over slot in the 5th round to get him away from that commitment to BYU. But with Lee, I agree with Nick. If there was a little bit more about the data, I think that Lee would have been on my top 50. I had him under consideration, but much like with Lowe, who didn't make my personal top 50 and actually didn't make any of our top 50s, it's kind of a wait-and-see thing.
Exactly.
And before we go, and Nick, I wanted to go back to you for a minute. You said that there was someone you really wanted to include that you kind of regret not including. Who was that?
Yeah, I just saw Bob's question too before we hopped on. So this is my answer to the question about who did not make our top 50 that would be on like a midseason list type thing. For me, it's Starlin Mieses, the outfielder. He's 6 months younger than Lysandro Sanchez, who made our top 50. So, younger bat. Walk and strikeout numbers. Strikeout rate was, like 22%? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think he had a walk and strikeout rate around 22%. So, a little bit more strikeouts than you want to see, even from a younger guy in the DSL, but good walk rate. 90th percentile EV was 103 miles per hour. That matches Jordan Sanchez and Nate George. And Mieses did it as a 17-year-old. And then I'll bring this quote back up from Baseball America has their hit plus model. According to them, it just says uses in-zone contact, overall contact, chase rate, 90th percentile EV, barrel rate, and ex-Wobicon. Mieses had a 109 hit plus, which ranked 5th best in the minors among all 17-year-old hitters. So I don't know, a guy who hits the ball that hard at the age of 17, and he's younger than probably everyone we've talked about except Jose Pena. I don't know. I'm excited to see what he can do in the FCL this year.
Yeah, I think Mieses is a good pick there. And Bob, since this was your question, do you have a guy in mind?
I was going to say Jaden LeRae, but since I already shouted him out, Kelvin Zapata, I think could be a break. Obviously, Andre Hidalgo is going to get a lot of attention on the international front, but I think Zapata was one of the bigger signings the year before, or I guess it would be January 2025. It seems like the second full year or the second year that these pitchers get a chance to develop in the system, whether it's just a year older or a year with the pitching development. Is that beer bitter, Nick?
I'm pushing through this. I feel miserable.
But yeah, I think Zapata could be. Isn't that Spanish for a shoe?
Putting me on the spot. I
was going to say the nickname could be the shoe. I like it. He's a shoe in for the top 50 in midseason.
Yeah, I think those are both really good choices. LeRae's a guy that jumps out at me as somebody that could be in there. Another one I'll throw out just because I don't know what to make of his second half last year. What if Trace Bright finds his way back on this list? I mean, this is a guy that we were pretty high on at one point, but then he really seemed like a bump in the road as a starter at Bowie that he wasn't going to be able to overcome, but he actually did have a decent second half last year, and I wonder, that's a guy that maybe you turn loose in the bullpen, and all of a sudden we're talking about him as a back-end top 50 prospect again. And I could also see Micah Aspen fitting that role. Tall lefty with a good ground ball rate. If he has success at AA and AAA next year, I think he's got to be in the conversation. He was personally in consideration for my top 50. I just didn't have the room for him in the end.
How about Ryan Long transition to bullpen? Another bullpen demon. Data's always been good. Stuff's always been good. If we could, guys like that, if they're going to start, transitioning guys a little bit sooner, maybe that'll help some prospect status for these guys that are just missing.
That's a good point. And with that does it for this episode of Orioles on the Verge. We will be back next week. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels and have access to bonus weekly coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself throughout the regular season, as well as monthly updates to our personal top 50s. And before we go, one last plug here. Live show at Checker Spot Brewing scheduled for Sunday, March 29th. Bob and I will be joined by Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles for our first ever kind of collaborative live show at Checker Spot. Will take place before that afternoon's game between the Orioles and the Twins. Checker Spot is a short walk from Camden Yards, so if you have tickets that day, come by, see the show ahead of time, then head over to the game. If you don't have tickets to the game, Checker Spot is a great place to hang out and watch it once we wrap up. Good food and drinks there. We'll have more information on our social media channels over the coming weeks, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. There's also information posted in Checker Spot's tap room if you make it over there in the month of March. For Bob Phil and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.